I want you to draw your hands using our forms. And so if you're looking at your hand, this part of our hand is it's kind of the shape of a square. And so, and then because our hand has a thickness to it, that means if we were to choose a form, that the palm of our hand would be a flat cube. And so the palm of your hand so I'm going to draw a cube, and it gets slightly narrow as it gets closer to the wrist. So I'm going to come in a little bit at the bottom, not too much. But so just to keep with our form, I'm going to draw the side of our cube here. So because I'm going to go from this bottom line to this line, whatever this measurement is, and so I might use my pencil to create that measurement. So I'm going to line it up, so here. So where my thumb is at, I'm going to line it up to here, and I can kind of make a mark here, and I can double check that. So this would be the length of my middle finger. Because this is the side of my hand, my index finger lines up with that side, so my index finger would line up here. So I need to divide this into 4 different sections. So I'm going to start with some cones here. These are a little too, these got a little too wide here, so bring that in. So following what I had here, so following this one, it curves, right? So my thumb would extend out here. So my first cylinder would be here, because this is where the knuckle would be. This one's a little taller, slightly higher than that one. This one is a little bit lower, not by much. And then from here, I'd probably start with the middle finger first, so that I make sure I hit that measurement. And then I know from here, my index finger is about this tall here, so I'm going to go ahead and draw in my next one. And so I call these like robot hands, because I'm breaking them into these shapes here, these cylinders that are stacked on top of each other, right? And again, feel free to pause this video if you need more time. This finger is our ring finger. This one is about the same height as our middle finger, so I'm going to bring this up. And if you notice, my cylinders, they're becoming a little bit more narrow as I go up. So they're fatter at the bottom here, and then they get slightly more narrow as I get to the top. So they're kind of like a combination of a cone and a cylinder. Not quite cone, not quite an exact cylinder. And then I know my pinky is the same height as this crease line. then the thumb, a lot of beginning students want to draw the thumb here or draw the thumb here. We have to remember that the thumb always begins at the wrist. So wherever our wrist is at, that's where it's at. And then the top part of our thumb here, so our thumb always at our wrist. And then this part is about half of our palm here. So this is about halfway of my palm, so starting from about here. And if you remember, this isn't going to be, so these are still going to be made out of cylinders as well, but this one's going to be a little bit like kind of a short, odd-shaped one, kind of like an odd triangle in a sense, or a trapezoid. So here, I'm going to have a shape, so looking at this one, I'm starting from here, I'm going to have a shape here, and a shape here, and I'm going to, so it's almost like I'm going to round it this way. And then I'll have my next cone here. And again, I'm going to bring it in slightly. So about here. And then I'm going to bring this here. And because we're seeing the side of it, that means we're going to see the top of our thumb, which means we'll see the top of our cylinder here. So I would erase this line here because we wouldn't see the side of the cube with this covering it. So this is our robot hand.
So let's start with this one on the bottom left-hand corner. This one's really challenging. And we're going to find the forms. Now we know the fingers are made of cones, and so I'm going to follow the shadows or the bends of the fingers. So here I'm going to start with the thumb. Create my cone here. And because the finger is facing directly towards us in this back area, we're going to see the cone as if it is just looking at it above. So it's just going to be a round shape. And from here, I'll start with this next finger. I know that this part of the finger bends, and so I'll start here, creating my cylinder. And because I see the finger bending here, I'm going to create my cone at this part, or my cylinder, sorry. And I know that because of that bend here, this part, the knuckles, are actually part of the cube of the palm of the hand. So here's this part, and it gets a little more narrow towards the pinky. And then there's the other side of it next to the thumb. And then I can move on and start creating my other stacked cylinders. And I'm just following the bend of every finger. And now that I have that first finger done, I can just move down to the next finger. And again, following where my fingers are bending. Starting at the knuckles. Creating my cylinder. Feel free to pause this at any point so that you have time to catch up. Then adding my next cylinder. And the pinky, even though we don't see a lot of it, we know it's made of 3 cylinders as well. So we're only going to see a little bit of that cylinder here. And then we have a little bit of the second cylinder. And then we're going to see just a little bit of that last cylinder. So now I can move on to the next thumb. And it's hard to see the light here because this thumb is so bright. But I can kind of see there's a tiny little shadow on the side there that I can see where it bends a bit. I can use all those creases to figure out my next cylinder. And then I can draw my next cylinder, and I'm going to follow that curve, that bend of the finger. That's going to create my cylinder for me, and that finger is hidden behind the rest of the hand. And then this part of my hand is my cube for the palm. And so I'm going to start with my one cylinder of the thumb. And you always want to have a starting point, so I usually start with the thumb here. And I'm going to use that as a measurement for everything else. So I'm going to go ahead and draw the next part. And I have those two shapes there. I can see that the side of the cube starts right here and touches this part of the cylinder. And then it angles down a bit. And I can put in this cylinder here. And I'm just using each shape to be a measurement for each other. Draw each cylinder. And now that I have those three cylinders, I can use them to help me draw the next finger. So the knuckles are pretty much in line here. So I can draw my next cylinder. It's not going to be as wide as the first one. They should get a little bit narrow. My next cylinder is slightly above that line. And then this last one, I can see that the finger is slightly longer than the first finger that I drew. And I can see how I'm using all of the lines to help create measurements for me. So these three knuckles are directly in line with one another. And I see that the pinky is angled. I'm only seeing part of it, kind of like a triangle. And then I'm comparing that little line to where it's at compared to the other knuckle. It's really short. And this is what's going to create that bend for me, that V. And then I have just that little bit of the pinky that we see there. And it's definitely creating that V. We want to make sure that that's matching. You don't see as much in the first few fingers, but that pinky really helps bring that shape to life. And then I can finish up the side of the knuckle here, or the side of the cube. Now we're going to start the next part. So I'm going to start with my next thumb, creating my cylinder. And then draw in that finger. We're almost done here. And then draw in the cube for the rest of the hand. You can see the curve up there attaching to the thumb.